Okay, funny things that have happened on Metrolift. Now I'm tired, I'm lazy, and I'm really, really queasy today. So, you want to find out what Metrolift is? Go Google paratransit and then come back. Paratransit. Okay, now what happens is the vehicle comes to the curb and they honk generally, but I'm kind of rigid in that I hate to keep people waiting. I have a messy house, I'm disorganized, I have my vices, but I hate to keep people waiting. I cannot abide it. So I lurk up at the front of the house. We have like a shotgun house. It's just a couple of rooms deep. It's not very wide. It's basically like 1.5 rooms wide. So I wait up at the front of the house. The minute I hear it, I run out. And then Ron takes a sweet time coming up. The funniest things ever that have happened on Metrolift. I can think of a couple offhand. It's funny now, but there was this one client who had a developmental disability and obviously some sexual abuse in her life. She got into the cab, and generally the cab has seats for 5 people. Four patrons, the driver, and somebody in a wheelchair in the back. And then they have all these straps and things to tie down the wheelchair. I have always privately thought that, they get in a really bad accident. The poor person in the wheelchair is going to be the only one to survive. They're going to be hanging upside down, hollering, "Get me out of here." And all the rest of us have gone to Jesus all mashed up, like something out of a zombie movie. Um, in fact, that brings me to one. One time, Ron was riding in the wheelchair, and the driver didn't tie the wheelchair down. He hit the brakes, and Ron went backwards and almost hit his head on the window. And the driver got an attitude, like, "How dare you almost fly out of the back of my vehicle?" Oh, oh, that was a good one. Then there was the lady who tried to throw my husband's wheelchair out the back door of the big paratransit van. And I said, "Don't worry, I'll get it." She said, "No, I'm going to do it." I said, "Ma'am, I'm scared you're going to break the wheelchair if you do that." She got a real attitude with me. Then there was a developmentally delayed woman I was mentioning earlier. She stole. She was a compulsive thief. And the sad thing is that she knew better because she was sneaky about it. She would like wait until the driver was looking the other way, and then she'd start like grabbing things and squirreling them away. She was strange. And anyway, she got in. We were all sitting in the back seat. There was a client in the front seat. Then there was the driver, and then there's a long seat for 3 in the back. I think they call it a bucket seat. Remember, I'm not a driver, so you can't see my hands. My hands are half the story. So she gets in, and Ron's wearing his fanny pack. And she just goes groping after his fanny pack. It was either the fanny pack or his groin. I'm not sure which, but she was very, very interested. And Ron had to cross his arms and lean over on his own groin like that just to keep the woman away from him. And they said, "Oh, yeah, she's like this." And we called the paratransit company, and they tried to tell us that because she had a developmentally delay, Ron just had to settle for being sexually assaulted every time he rode with the woman. And he was smart because he always sat between me and her whenever we had to ride together. And she like tried to mug me for my soda one day. Now, admittedly, I shouldn't have been drinking in the vehicle. I will cry dry mouth due to my psychiatric condition and taking my medication for the psychiatric condition. But she was like after my Coke and then Ron's in the middle trying not to black. Then there was Hot Dog. He had picked us up at Sam's Club. Sam's Club, if you've never been there, has these delicious giant hot dogs. They're made by Nathan's. If you know Nathan's, you know they're. I can't eat them now on the Wellview train. I get really queasy. But it's a large, hot dog, and it's a good size, and they have like a combo for I think about $2. You get a 32-ounce soda. Anyways, this guy we ended up calling Hot Dog for obvious reasons picked us up. He had a client in the front seat, and he had me and Ron in the back. And he had to get on the freeway, and he had to talk to dispatch, and he was flirting with the client in the front seat. I think just to make her feel pretty. I don't think he was really into her. But, you know how some guys will kind of flirt with an old lady or something just to kind of make her feel a little, like that? I think that's what it was. But then I'm not always good with the stuff. I mean, I had a coworker confide in me that he had to take the blue pills to perform sexually, and I thought that was normal. I'm like, oh, really? I take Excedrin for headaches. I didn't get it. Then when he made the move, I'm like, oh, if they're confiding in me about the blue pills, that probably means he's thinking about me in a sexual manner. Took me a while to get that one. I am not always aware. So he got some packets of condiments, relish and mustard and all, and he has to talk to dispatch, and he's flirting with the client in the front. So he's going along the beltway like this, putting condiments on his hot dog, driving with his elbows, and he's taking the on-ramp at 80 miles an hour. And I'm like, oh, dear God, oh, God, oh, God. And these cars going, oh, I'm like, oh, dear God. This is before I really got back into my faith, and I'm just so freaked out. He looks at me in the back seat, and he goes, are you okay? And he's still driving with his elbows and eating the hot dog, and now he's talking to dispatch. Now that he's applied the condiments, he's talking to dispatch and eating the hot dog and driving with his elbows, and I'm thinking, oh, dear God, I'm going to die. Or worse, I'm going to end up permanently maimed for life because of this guy had to have his hot dog. I mean, why not just pull over and say, guys, I'm starving. I'm just going to eat this hot dog. I would have waited. I mean, we were just going home. So anyways, he's like, are you all right? And I said, oh, I have a headache. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll get you home real quick. And he speeds up. And I'm like, oh, dear God, I'm going to die. But I can't really say anything because, if you just shout at the guy, he's not going to become a better driver. And he's still kind of winking at the girl next. And we finally get to the house. And I have this overwhelming urge to drop to my knees and praise God. And I get into the house. And Ron's like, you okay? I said, oh, thank you, God. And then I told him, and he's like, what? He's blind. He had no idea the guy was driving that bad. Then I wasn't personally in this vehicle, but I remember we have a coworker who's blind, and we helped him get signed up for Metrolift, and his ride came one day, and the vehicle comes up, and he's like, oh, who are you here for? Oh, you're here for me. And he gets in the back, and her phone rings, and she answers the phone, and then she drives off in the parking lot, and she parks. And it's 10 minutes, and she's just parked there. And I'm like, what the heck? What's going on? And then I'm thinking, I'm glad she wasn't for us. Then she leaves. And the next day I asked Mike, I said, Mike, what's the deal with the driver? He said, oh, you're going to love this. Right as I got in the car, her best friend called to say that she was running off with the woman's boyfriend. So the driver's boyfriend and her best friend hooked up and were giving her the finger. And he said she screamed and cried at the best friend for a while, and then she called the boyfriend, former boyfriend, and he said, I didn't know she knew that kind of language, and I'm not going to repeat it here, but it was extremely profane. She said, and after she got done questioning his legitimacy and his virility and all, she hung up, and she said, okay, sir, I'll get you home now, and just completely professional, and drove. And then there was, there used to be a lot more problems when they were on the cell phone. Happily, I mean, it's not a good thing that there've been all these horrible, gruesome accidents, but the fact that these gruesome accidents have gotten the paratransit company to realize a driver on a cell phone is a really, really bad idea. So, if they catch a driver on a cell phone, instant termination. And as it should be, because the scariest rides I ever had were when the driver would be on the cell phone, obviously some ongoing drama in their life. Well, I told her to go to the such and such, and it's just like, oh, come on. And I'm like, you need to turn left here. And I'm like, I'm on the phone! It's like, excuse me, I thought your job was driving. Never said anything. I'm just like, whatever. And then they're like, well, where is it? I said, remember the block back? I told you to turn. Oh, making me waste my gas. I'm like, oh. Yeah. So I'm happy that ended. In fact, there was one guy. He was really, really scary. This is like the only guy I ever called in on. Okay. The guy had his little texting thing. And he was driving. And he'd get in and he's like this. And I said, oh, hi, where are we going? And he said, oh, you're next. And I said, oh, well, you can just turn here. And he goes, all the way. And he's not even looking at the street. It's just like that, constantly. And I'm finally begging him. I said, can you please put the thing down? I really don't feel comfortable with you texting while you're driving. Then he tries to tell me, oh, I'm not texting. I'm reading my GPS. Why are the thumbs moving if it's a GPS? Huh? Why is he getting beep text message tones as he's moving his thumbs, looking at the little gadget in his lap, and not even looking at the road? So I said, you know, can you stop? I was begging him, please stop this. I don't feel safe. And he's like, no. And he basically told me to F off. And Ron heard this, and he got out and he called immediately. He said, you know, this guy isn't safe. He's riding around texting. You know, it's a safety hazard, because he could feel the way the guy was driving too. It was very jerky. Cars were blaring their horns at us when he would drift over into their lane, stuff like that. And the sad thing is, they didn't even fire him for that. They wrote him up. And then about a month and a half later, he was given our trip, and he said, no, I don't want to carry them. You're going to have to send a supervisor. The supervisor came out. She's like, I know you guys. You guys are great. Why did this guy refuse your trip? I said, the only person I can think of who's mad at us, the only driver who's mad at us, is the guy who was texting. She's like, oh, really? I said, yeah. And then I related the whole story about how I was begging him to stop and the text message tones and all. And she's like, really? And she's like, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on him. And I said, yeah, you know, if I'm wrong, then, you know, you won't catch him doing anything out of line. Good, but it's really a safety issue. And, you know, there are a lot of people who can't speak for themselves riding the paratransit, and he could hurt one of them, and I'd hate to see that happen. And she's, yeah, I'll keep an eye on him. And she shadowed him one day and caught him texting constantly, driving very unsafely, and they fired him. You know, so, and then he went around saying it was all my fault. But, you know, if you weren't texting, you wouldn't have gotten canned. I don't know, any job where you're going to pay you, I heard it's $20 an hour. Basically, they just give you a schedule and you keep it. They don't want you to be on a cell phone or texting. And you got 12 to 14 hours a day if you want it. You can work 7 days a week if you want it, making $20 an hour. And you're going to throw it all out the window because your girlfriend was texting where you at. You know, it's stupid. So, other funny things. I'm thinking. Those are the ones that really come to mind. The just drivers who were just so horrible. You knew they weren't going to last long. And I was so freaking scared that later on it was funny. And it's just like, God really isn't ready for me yet. And I am convinced that if it's not our friend with the white pickup truck, it's going to be Metrolift that kills me in some kind of accident. Either that, or I'm going to be out having a day out and somebody texting or whatever is going to get me driving. But whew, I could tell you some stories. And the funny thing is that, you know, I'll ride with family sometimes, and they're like, oh, I ran a red light. I'm sorry about that. And I'm just like, is that all? One time we had a big white van pick us up. You know, the big paratransit vans. They've got the wheelchair lift on the side and everything. And a coworker lives in the next subdivision over. And she walked up to me one day. She said, you know, you're really brave, Heather. And I'm like, how's that? She says, you know, I followed your vehicle today. She said, did you know you got up over 80 miles an hour on the freeway? She said, once we got up there, I had to drop off, but that driver was just tearing it up. Well, yeah, that sounds about right. We got to work real quick. So those are some of my Metrolift stories, paratransit adventures. Oh, and there was the time I brought an 8-foot barbell on the vehicle, and they let me. Thank you. Never did that again.